This is it, right? There's not like another big Duggar family secret that is going to come out.
No.
Okay.
This wasn't it. There were other big Duggar family secrets that came out, mostly surrounding the eldest child, Josh.
Josh is our oldest. He married Anna, and they had our first granddaughter, Mackenzie.
He was arrested last week. It was for CP. Big shock given his history.
Jill and Jessa Duggar are 2 of the 19 kids belonging to Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar. Their reality TV show on TLC has been a hit for 9 seasons. And tonight, they reveal themselves as victims of their brother Josh's inappropriate touching, saying they want to set the record straight about what really went on some 12 years ago under their parents' roof and what did not.
You never think like this will happen to me or something. And in our case, you know, it's very mild compared to what happens to some
I know
young
so many
women.
girls go through things that are way worse.
You do not view Josh as a pedophile.
No.
What I'm asking you is, can you understand the critics' reaction to this news?
I can understand that, but I think I know that every one of us have done things wrong. That's why Jesus came. I feel like this is more about there's an agenda.
Okay, we realize this is serious, but at the same time, it wasn't like a horror story or like this terrible thing where we're like, oh my goodness, we're like,
That's one of the headline covers, House of Horrors.
yeah, it's ridiculous.
That is not how you view it.
No.
Not even sure where to start with this. Josh Duggar is the oldest son of the Duggar family. He's the oldest son of Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar, who went on to have 19 children. Did they have 20 children? I don't know. They had a lot of children because they do not believe in birth control.
We are not a typical family. And it's not just because of our enormous size.
We have very conservative values.
Our children watch very little television, and we closely monitor their access to the internet, among other things.
As for school, that happens around the dining room table.
They're very famous for not believing in birth control and for having a bunch of children, and also for sheltering their children from the outside world, having them be homeschooled. They do not go to a secular university where they could have their opinions and their beliefs and their traditions challenged. A very heavily monitored internet access, that sort of thing. Grew up very sheltered, very religious. They're also famous for the very unusual in this day and age, courting practices where instead of dating somebody and then marrying them, you court them.
Our relationship started as a courtship versus dating, and that is trusting God for the one person that's right for you versus shopping around trying to find the right one.
Dating is training for divorce. It's like, oh, I'm in love, and a week later they break up. Next guy, oh, I'm in love. 2 weeks later they break up. And it's training for a divorce mentality.
It's not just that they don't believe in premarital sex, but they don't believe in doing a lot of things that could potentially lead to premarital sex.
Always have a chaperone just so that there's no difficulty staying pure and keeping all that, keeping their hearts, where they need to be.
So then when they're courting, all of their dates are either group dates or they're chaperoned. When they contact the person that they're dating, like it's within a group chat that the dad is also involved in. It's very...
We believe a lot of times if you're alone with a person that it can create desires that can kind of get stirred up and you don't have any accountability and can kind of lead to some hanky-panky.
From my understanding of this whole courting system, the first time you're in a room alone with the person that you're going to marry is like after you're married on your wedding day. By then, you go from one extreme to never being alone with this person, never having a private conversation with this person, having very limited physical contact, no hugging from the front, you just do like the side hug thing, to now you have to have sex on demand, you have to have sex whenever your husband wants, you need to be fruitful and multiply, no birth control, have a bunch of kids. That sort of thing.
Okay, people ask me, you're engaged, you're going to be married, what's wrong with kissing or even having sex before you're married? There's certain lines that you just don't cross. And by not crossing those lines and having those kind of relations before we're married, I am building trust in Anna, knowing that after we're married, she can trust me with anything.
Granted, I am somebody who kind of grew up. I didn't grow up like this. I wasn't this.
So once we got engaged, then we can now hold hands, and we want to save our first kiss for our wedding day, and really feel like that's something special that we want to just save until then.
It's good to stay away even from romance novels, because a lot of times those just stir up desires in our heart as young ladies that cannot be righteously fulfilled.
We don't want to stir up desires, different things that cannot be righteously fulfilled, that cannot be, I don't know. So anyways, our family has chosen not to dance.
Now, even though we did not grow up this extreme, still grew up conservative Christian, as I've mentioned in a few videos. We were taught that it was sinful to have premarital sex. And I think if you grow up in that culture, you know other people who also made the vow to not have premarital sex. And you know people who broke that vow. You know people who had every intention to not have sex before they get married. But what happens? Hormones are raging and you just give in to all those urges, your willpower is low, and I do feel bad for those people in that situation because of the cognitive dissonance there. Like, their attitudes do not match their behavior. Somebody who thinks that it's very important to wait to have sex, but then they feel like they failed if they do end up having sex, and it's a very impulsive decision, and they don't make wise decisions regarding like birth control and stuff. Like, that's awful. I guess it is healthier in a way to be in a situation where you're not going to give in to those urges, but much better than that is to just not treat dating as if it's a series of potential landmines that you have to avoid. If the only way you can like make sure that you don't have sex is to make sure that you don't talk to your husband to be in a private conversation before you get married, is it worth it? Is it really worth it? Some people would say yes, because people who believe in abstinence, people who practice abstinence before marriage, they have more successful marriages and their divorce rates are lower. And I always say to that, their divorce rates are lower because they don't believe in divorce, and they don't get divorced when anybody else in their right mind would choose to get divorced.
Josh was the focus of several scandals in 2015, including being unfaithful to Anna and admitting to molesting 5 minor girls when he was a teen.
Anna is amazing. She displays to each one of us what it means to have unconditional love, I think.
So, Anna Duggar, oh my God, if I were her, I would have left. I never would have married that guy. But especially when the first scandal hit.
So when I said, victims, you furrowed your brow a little. I mean, do you feel like the victim of a molestation?
Well, I think in the case of what Josh did, it was very wrong. I'm not going to justify anything that he did or say it was okay, not permissible. But I do want to speak up in his defense against people who are calling him a child molester or a pedophile or a rapist, and people are saying. I'm like, that is so overboard and a lie, really.
We found out in 2015 that Josh Duggar had inappropriately touched, sexually assaulted younger girls when he was 14 or 15 years old. When I first heard that story, I knew none of the details, and my first reaction to that was, okay, I can understand how that happened given his upbringing. I pictured it in a way like, say you're on a diet, you're on a very restrictive diet, and you starve yourself, and you have all of these like moral attachments to food, but then you get so hungry that you just binge eat a bunch of food in secret, eat a bunch of shit that you don't even want, that doesn't even taste good, but it's just there. And it's as a result of like feeling very shameful about giving into your natural urges and eating a normal amount of food. That's kind of like how I pictured what happens sometimes when you're raised in purity culture. Then you end up having sex and you make a bunch of unwise decisions. It's like the binge eating thing.
People will get mad at me for saying that, but I'm like, I can say this, I was one of the victims, so I can speak out and I can say this and set the record straight here. In Josh's case, he was a young boy in puberty and a little too curious about girls. and that got him into some trouble. And he made some bad choices.
Then I read the police reports and I'm like, whoa. I understand being a hormonal teenager. I do not understand being 14 or 15 years old and feeling compelled to sexually molest a 5-year-old girl.
God's grace can give me the strength to love Josh when others would say he doesn't deserve it.
I understand that Anna Duggar was brainwashed and that she feels that she needs to stick by her husband and all of that, and that God wants her to stay in this marriage. I remember when I was a kid, we were taught that divorce was wrong, and we were taught the story of Hosea, who married a prostitute, and he stayed with a prostitute who kept on cheating on him over and over and over again. And the moral of the story is, hey, even if you have a spouse who doesn't treat you right, look at Hosea. He stayed married. So can you. But I do feel like as a mother who has a 4 or 5-year-old daughter, it is your responsibility to get yourself out of that marriage. And I don't know. I feel like I am blaming the victim with Anna, but like, it's very hard for me to not judge her. And following this scandal, we also got the Ashley Madison scandal, and they were even more upset by the Ashley Madison scandal than they were by him molesting a 5-year-old girl.
Fresh controversy for former reality TV star Josh Duggar among the millions of Ashley Madison users outed in a hack exposing would-be cheaters, shining a spotlight on that line between private morals and public moralizing. Why would a man who helped build a multi-million-dollar TV empire play so fast and loose with family values?
Life is short. Have an affair.
And the justification for that was like, oh yeah, he molested all of these girls when he was a teenager, and that happened a long time ago, but he did this Ashley Madison thing as an adult.
I mean, it was one thing months before when we looked back on the situation that happened when he was a teenager and saying, that was so long ago, but here's something like present day, like today. This is an issue that's happened right now. In the other situation, we had already brought closure to that. That was something of the past.
I can understand staying with a partner who cheats on you. And when that Ashley Madison scandal hit and we found out that he was unfaithful to his wife, I'm like, at least he cheated on his wife with an adult woman and not with a 5-year-old.
When Josh had been through all of this, he had gone to the Christian-based treatment program, he had gone through counseling, he had gone to the police, and he emerged back into the home. Did you feel that he was a threat still? Or did you feel
Not at all.
that he could be trusted at that point?
Not at all.
Did you ever worry that the treatment didn't work, especially with so many young children in the house?
No. Josh was a changed person.
These Fox News interviews that Jill, Jessa, Jim Bob, and Michelle gave to Megyn Kelly completely inconsistent with the police report.
This information was released illegally, and so I wonder why all this press is not going after the system for releasing these juvenile records. That is a huge story. Now what our son did 12 years ago is I'm sure it's a major story to them too, but yet hopefully justice will be served on the ones that release juvenile records to protect other juveniles from their records being released.
The extent of it was mild, inappropriate touching on fully clothed victims. Most of it while girls were sleeping.
We didn't even know about it until he went and confessed it to my parents, and
Neither one of
they
you
shared
knew.
it with us.
No. None of the victims were aware of what happened until Joshua confessed, and then
It wasn't like we were keeping a secret, afraid or something. It was we didn't know.
For those things to be twisted and shared in a slanderous way, as a mom, that breaks my heart for my girls, because I think this is such a horrible, they've been victimized more by what has happened in these last couple of weeks than they were 12 years ago, because they honestly, they didn't even understand or know that anything had happened until after the fact when they were told about it.
Talking about how, oh my God, this guy molested a 5-year-old, that's so messed up, that's so wrong, blah, 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 blah. That's more damaging in their eyes than the actual act of molestation.
So were the Duggars targeted by the tabloids because of their Christian beliefs? They answer that question and talk about the future when we come back.
The issue is there are people who think of them as like this very pure family, and they do think that Christians are under attack by secular culture. So then when they watch Fox News and they see Jill and Jessa not crying when they're talking about Josh Duggar sexually assaulting them, but then crying when they're talking about how this was released to the public, then they're going to think, oh, as a way to honor the victims, I'm not going to read the police reports. But then if you don't read the police reports, you don't know that they were lying their asses off. They're saying that these girls were not aware of what was going on. They were not traumatized by this, and that the parents handled this well. Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar sent Josh to go build houses. By the way, that 5-year-old child was not asleep. Saying, oh yeah, the victims were asleep at that time does not make it okay. But like, oh yeah, he was very sly. They didn't even know what was happening. She knew what was happening. And they said that he was the one that confessed, and that they didn't understand that he had even done this until he had confessed to doing it. Maybe that's the case for them, not the case for all of the victims, according to the police report that I read. Yeah, so they were just downplaying it and acting like, oh yeah, this is something that we dealt with. It's a private matter. It only affected those 5 specific people, and it's not something that's going to keep on happening. I just couldn't help but think if he was gay or if he was transgender, oh my goodness, they would have put in so much more effort with conversion therapy, all of that.
You were in the news for making a robocall that suggested transgender people might want to go into the bathrooms of girls, locker rooms of girls, and that they may be child molesters.
The Fayetteville City Council is voting on an ordinance this Tuesday night that would allow men, yes, I said men, to use women's and girls' restrooms, locker rooms, showers, sleeping areas, and other areas that are designated for females only.
Folks have used that in the past week against you, saying, how could you unfairly, in their view, compare transgendered people to child molesters, suggest they are child molesters, knowing what you know about Josh?
I think that protecting young girls and not allowing young men and men in general to go into a girl's locker room is just common sense.
But this is different because you injected child molestation into it.
I don't believe the citizens of Fayetteville would want males with past child predator convictions that claim they are female to have a legal right to enter private areas reserved for women and girls. We should never place the preference of an adult over the safety and innocence of a child. Parents, who do you want undressing next to your daughter at the public swimming pool's private changing area?
I think you actually said pedophile in that, and actually a pedophile is an adult that preys on children. Joshua was actually 14 and just turned 15 when he did what he did. And I think the legal definition is 16 and up for being an adult preying on a child. So he was a child preying on a child.
They're very much homophobic, very transphobic. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm a Christian, and the way that I interpret the Bible, these things are a sin. Hate the sin, love the sinner, that sort of thing. I think that that's problematic, but I can, to a degree, work with that. Their disgust in LGBT people took on a think of the children moral panic, and they got political about it, and they actively lobbied against transgender people going to the bathroom. They did so claiming to care about the children. Meanwhile, they have this big skeleton in their closet.
How about Josh, though? He's been out there, with the Family Research Council, talking about family values and suggesting that certain lifestyles are not appropriate, in particular the gay and lesbian lifestyle.
I mean, it's right to say, here's what I believe, here's my values. Even if you've made stupid mistakes or failures, if you've had failures in your past, it doesn't mean you can't be changed. And I think that's where, I think the real issue is people are making this sound like it happened yesterday.
And that it's ongoing.
And that it was very severe.
Happened 12 years ago, when he was a child himself.
And again, the way that they framed it was like, oh yeah, we can have beliefs. It's not just that you had beliefs that this is wrong. It's lobbying against these things and using think of the children rhetoric. And then when all of this came out, it's like, oh, you guys said that you care about the victims, but you don't really care about the victims because you traumatized us much worse by releasing this and talking about this and reporting this. So I did actually make a video about the whole Josh Duggar situation back in 2015, which I've since privated or deleted or unlisted. I don't even remember. But one of the points that I made was that it's very damaging to teach purity culture, especially to people who have been victims of sexual violence. I think that purity culture in general is horrible. It's definitely something that we should critique, no matter who is the recipient of this information, but it's especially hurtful to hear all of these horrible things about how you're less worthy as a potential spouse or whatever if you've had any sexual contact, when that sexual contact that you did have happened against your will. And that's one of the things that I was really mad at Jim Bob and Michelle for. I will say too that when it comes to purity culture, they conflate like all sexual immorality is kind of equally bad. So then when they talk about sexual abuse or sexual assault or that sort of thing, they still talk about it through the lens of you should wait until you're married to have sex. Okay, so you're a woman and you have sex with your boyfriend before you're married. He doesn't actually respect you and love you. He may say that he loves you, but he could just be using you for your body. And the best way to know that you've found a man who really loves you as a person and not just as a sex object is to find a man who's willing to wait until you're married. So then if you decide to wait until you're married and you're successful in doing that, you're a virgin on your wedding night and you only have sex with your husband, that might lead you to a false sense of security where you think, oh, all of these issues with like sexual immorality and all that stuff, women who have husbands that cheat on them, who don't respect them, those other people have those problems. People who didn't wait until they're married are more likely to have those problems.
I just remember when I was growing up, I felt very insecure and unprotected when I dated. And this is a very protecting situation where fathers and daughters work together to find the right one. And that way the guy has to be accountable to the dad and he better toe the line.
Amen.
They don't really talk about any red flags or anything like that. Like the only red flag that you should look out for is a partner who wants to have sex with you before you're married. There's just a lot of miseducation when it comes to what to look out for an abusive partner because you've already screened that out by not having sex with them before you're married. So you already found somebody who actually respects you.
Our goal is to remain pure before marriage. The emotions are there, but the heart is, it's like I love her so much that I would not step over that line. I would not cross that line because I love her that much and I'm looking forward to that. But it's such a blessing to know that when you give your heart to that person, that you're giving your whole heart and not giving bits and pieces.
The last thing that I want to bring up is the issue regarding housewives. I see a lot of anti-feminist women out there who want to be housewives or they want to advocate on behalf of the housewives and they say, feminists do not want you to be housewives. Feminists hate housewives. That is not true. If you want to be a housewife, you should be allowed to be a housewife. That's completely fine. If you want to work, you should be allowed to work. My whole thing, and I think that a lot of feminists feel this way, or we all have the same concerns, is that if your main career goal is to be a housewife, to cook and clean for your husband and children, what happens if your husband turns out to be abusive? What happens if that marriage is unsuccessful? What happens if that man leaves you? What kind of job are you going to be able to get? How will you have something on your resume if you didn't go to college, if you didn't have any other jobs? It's not that we want to discourage women from being housewives. We just want to make sure that if you are a housewife, one, it's your own decision, and two, you have a plan B. If everything goes to hell, hopefully you went to college, hopefully you have a way to get out if you need to get out. What we're seeing with Anna Duggar is she has 6 children, she has 3 daughters, she is pregnant with her 4th daughter, her 7th child, and she's with a man who is now being arrested for possessing CP. You need to get out for the sake of your children. But how will she get out? I know that the last time there was a scandal, her brother, he disapproved of Josh, saying Josh isn't actually sorry, he's just sorry that he got caught, and I think he offered to take her in.
Now, a Facebook account that may belong to Anna's older brother has surfaced, and the comments are harsh. Daniel Keller writes, writes, "I won't stop trying to get that pig out of our family. I have been thinking of Anna and sick to my stomach for her for the last few days." According to that Facebook account, Anna plans to stay with Josh, and her parents are encouraging her to do so.
But I don't know, it's going to be really hard with 7 children all on your own. Didn't go to university, had a very sheltered life. I feel bad for Anna, but I also find it hard not to judge, and I want to have empathy, but it's a little hard for me because I know that there's children involved, you know, and I want to know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.